Witcher is a game rich in amazing locations that you can find so many interesting things. Some of them might freak you out a bit. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on gameranx, 10 Witcher locations freakier than you thought. Starting off at number 10, in the Lindenvale Graveyard, there is both an Easter egg and it's obviously a very freaky location. It's a graveyard, but it's doing something that you might instantly recognize, and it might still give you a little bit of a chill. So there's a graveyard connected to an early game town. It's not too far into the game, and there's a small structure you can enter there. If you enter it and then leave, you might notice something. All the statues in the area have turned to look at you. Now, some people might not even notice this. Some people might come out and think the statues were already doing that. They weren't. And it's a reference to a really popular Doctor Who episode called Blink, which featured statues that pretty much worked the same way. They were called Weeping Angels. It's basically just a reference, but it's scary. When I first did it, I was like, oh, Weeping Angels. And I have kind of a love-hate relationship with Doctor Who. That episode falls squarely into the love side of it. That's a really good, scary episode of that show. And I think of creating some sort of lasting psychological trauma in myself, because when this happened to me, I was like, no, don't do that. At number 9 is the Novigrad Haunted House. Now, one of the first things you do in Novigrad after talking to Triss and all that jazz is to find Corinne Tilly, a dreamer who might possibly be able to help you on your mission to find Ciri. When you find her, she's in a supposedly haunted house in Novigrad. Now, it is a cramped house, it's kind of creepy, but nothing too bad. Still, it's obvious something is going on as Corinne is asleep and isn't waking up, so there's probably some kind of magic going on. You investigate, you break through a weak wall in the basement, you find an old oven, and this creature, called a godling, jump scares you. Now, the godling itself is actually basically harmless, just wants to be left alone, but it got me the first time. For such a short quest, this one really pulls you all over the place. First you're skeptical, then you're curious, and it gets a little creepy when you go down in the basement, then it hits you with a big jump scare that turns out not to actually be that bad. This is also one of the few locations that we have on this list that doesn't have a tragic, awful backstory to it, but it still manages to get kind of freaky. At number 8 is the abandoned village in White Orchard, which is literally the first contract you can take in the game. It's Devil by the Well. It is a surprisingly creepy encounter and kinda sets an expectation for the game's spookiness. And you wouldn't really think it'd be that creepy because a noon wraith, by its very nature, only comes out during the day. But there's something really unsettling about this grotesque thing appearing at a time when you'd normally be safe in a fantasy story like The Witcher. The whole abandoned village has a somber atmosphere, and you find clues regarding what happened there as you explore. So what happened is the villagers in this small town told the court in the capital about all of this local lord's crimes. So the local lord, the guy in charge of White Orchard, just killed everybody. And now there's this ghost haunting the well, so no one can settle in this obviously cursed and awful place. This is a section that stuck with a lot of people, particularly me, because it's something you encounter early, and it's one of the most memorable things that happens in the game. It just sets this tone of abnormality to the types of things you'll be solving during the course of this game that really does persist for the most part. At number 7 is the Tamarra Estate Ruins. This location's in Toussaint in the Blood and Wine expansion, and is a surprisingly dour location for a place that's normally so bright and colorful. Probably the first thing you're going to notice in this place is that there are spoons everywhere. Look around, spoons. There's a curse scratched into the wall too, but seriously, tons of spoons! Oh yeah, that curse too. The spotted white that resides here is also pretty freaky, but probably the creepiest thing about this place is the story it has to tell. What happened was, a beggar came to the estate with a bowl and a spoon, meaning that the lord should give him some food, as per old Toussaint tradition, but Marlene, the baron's daughter, refused the beggar. In turn, the beggar cursed her with his spoon, so she would never eat from a spoon again. It's both ridiculous, like you could eat with a fork, but it's also grotesque, and also ends much freakier than I think anybody would expect if described some sort of spoon curse. At number 6 is the forest near Reardon Manor. One of the early quests you can get when you arrive in Velen is the Fall of the House of Reardon, where you deal with some ghosts haunting an abandoned estate. Pretty standard stuff for this list, though somewhat creepy. It wouldn't normally really be worth mentioning. Now, the real, actual freaky thing we're talking about resides in the southwest of the manor. At this point in the game, you're more accustomed to exploring the areas and sort of investigating, see if you can find anything, maybe random stuff that might be useful later. So you might wander into this little stretch of forest that's found at the end of a dead-end trail. You get to the end of the road and suddenly the area gets much creepier and darker just before you see this thing, the Leshen, one of the most intimidating monsters in the Witcher universe. The suggested level for House of Reardon is Quest 6, the minimum level of a Leshen is 20 however, so most likely you're not going to stand a chance against this thing. Between its teleporting, its ranged attacks, and its unconventional attack patterns, the Leshen is one of the most fearsome enemies in the game, and seeing one this early definitely freaked me out. At number 5 is Horace Jr.'s mansion. Now, this is one of the freakiest locations in the game that doesn't involve magic or monsters. This is a mansion owned by one of the 4 crime bosses of Novigrad, and it's kind of a total surprise when you get there. I mean, yeah, you do hear about how bad this guy is, but you really don't see it. When you actually go after him and invade his hideout in the mission Get Junior, you find yourself in a house of horrors just filled with the bodies of murdered women, and it's a lot of bodies, just to be clear. It's nasty. Horson himself is actually a total pushover. Geralt is, basically superhuman and deals with him pretty easily. But his mansion is shocking. It's brutal, and it's really just something you don't necessarily expect given how normal it is outside. I mean, they do warn you, like I said, you hear about how bad this guy is pretty constantly, but still. At number 4 is Udalric's old family home, which is in Skellige. You take a quest called Possession, which brings you into this old decrepit home. At first you kind of think it's a normal old ghost that's haunting Jarl Udalric, but after some investigating you find out something a little more sinister. You see, Udalric claims that the gods are commanding him to torture and hurt himself. He even pokes out his own eye because the gods told him to. Geralt, however, quickly figures out it's not the gods who are commanding the Jarl, but a rare and nasty demon called a Him, which feeds off human guilt and forces their host to mutilate themselves. So just an all-around nice evening in. No, actually it's pretty nasty stuff. It doesn't really help that this thing only appears as a shadow, so your first encounter with one can kind of come as a shock as you see shadows change around Geralt. You can fight this thing or get rid of it through other means, but either way, it's a nasty thing. Mean creature that only appears once in the main game and really catches you off guard because, again, you're kind of expecting it to just be like a normal ghost hunt. At number 3 is Crookback Bog, which is located in southern Velen. It's a large swamp area. It's a little creepy just on its own, but there's a lot more weird stuff going on here than you might first suspect. First off, tons of drowners, tons of water hags, tons of harpies infest the area, but it's the things you don't see that make it more freaky. In the center of the swamp, there's an orphanage run by a creepy woman named Gran, which, normal place to run an orphanage. Her and the people of the local village pay great respect to the creatures called the crones and offer their ears in tribute to them. You see a painting of the crones at one point. Obviously they're gonna be uglier than that, but nothing can really prepare you for how grotesque and disgusting these things actually look, or how powerful they are for that matter. Going into this place, you think you're going to be dealing with some Hansel and Gretel type witches, but not the case. The place turns out to be incredibly important in the whole story of Witcher 3, so it's quite a shock considering you're probably just thinking this is all just side quest material. Also, did I mention they gross? At number 2 is Crow's Perch, which is on the Bloody Baron's estate, by the way. The village and estate owned by the Bloody Baron, the self-proclaimed ruler of Velen, doesn't actually seem too bad at first, outside the fact that it's owned by a dude called the Bloody Baron, but there's also like a ton of creepy secrets just hiding around. The first one you'll probably notice is this thing, Uma, a strange little creature that the Baron keeps around as a court jester. The significance of this guy doesn't come into play until way later, but I mean, look at him. He's freaky to have around for no real reason. The real horror doesn't really begin until you start doing missions for the Baron, where he tasks you with finding his missing wife and daughter. There's some pretty nasty secrets that slowly come to light, that you find out his wife had a miscarriage after one of the drunken violent episodes that the Baron had, and buried the stillborn child. Because of the nature of its death, the child turned into a botchling, a really revolting creature that Geralt has to deal with. The whole scene where you have to deal with the creature too is disgusting, might I add. Even if you can't help but feel sorry for it, it's very freaky. And finally, at number 1, the Von Everich Estate. Considered by most to be the single most freaky location in the entire Witcher series, this place is pretty spooky from the outset. It's your classic abandoned, overgrown mansion, but going in, you're probably thinking you'll be dealing with the usual ghosts and ghouls you're used to seeing throughout The Witcher 3, but that's where this place just is full of surprises. You go here as part of the main quests of the Hearthstone expansion, and while this whole add-on has a creepy atmosphere to it, it's this location that really takes things to the extreme. One of the first things you see is this monstrosity called the Caretaker, a creature with skin stretched over its eyes and nose. Yeah, I mean, you see it and you're like, oh, not in for a good time, are we? Not exactly a birthday party going on in here. The place eventually goes full Silent Hill and traps you in this bizarre painted world and forces you to fight these nasty looking creatures called Etherreals. Like, the whole thing's way more extreme and crazy than you could ever expect going in, and it's definitely one of the most memorable locations in the entire game, if not series. And that's all for today. Let us know what you think. If you remember some other creepy locations that might be fun to share, feel free. Or you can tell us about something that maybe you saw in one of these locations. If you liked this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. The best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription. So click subscribe and don't forget to enable all notifications. As always, thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at FalconHero. We'll see you next time right here on gameranx.